DFS! Welcome into week 11 of one of the most accurate DFS shows in the industry. This is the Adjusted Line Play Report presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. I am your host, Todd Hoffman. You can find myself over on Twitter at ToddZilla1337. You can find Zilla Fantasy Elite over on Twitter at Zilla Fantasy. Today's show is powered by Rain Total Body Fuel. Ooh boy. Looking to make it rain some cash in DFS this week? Tune in to the Adjusted Line Play Report from Zilla Fantasy Elite. Follow host Todd Hoffman while he delivers the most accurate DFS advice in the industry and make it rain. Today's flavor, folks, is Mango-Matic. Oh boy. Don't think that will pick up on the mic, but ooh, that's good stuff. Got Mango-Matic pretty much because the Adjusted Line Play Report makes setting your lineups automatic. Reduce your player pool to the ones that you know are going to do well on the week and just watch that money roll into your account. All right, just to give a teeny tiny brief glimpse into how accurate and successful this stuff is, we're heading into week 11, so we've had 10 weeks. We have cashed in FanDuel tournaments in 70% of the weeks, and I mean FanDuel large field tournaments, ones with, over 250,000 entrants, upwards of, 800,000 entrants. We're cashing in 70% of those, or making more than our entry fee in over 70% of those. Full disclosure, 3 out of the last 4 weeks have been, in between about 5% to 25% losses. But on the whole, 7 out of 10 weeks, we have made more than our money in entry fees, and that's in between 25 to 400%. So 4xing on the week in these large field tournaments without any significant victories, but just, hitting 2, 3, 4x, 5x on some of your lineups and doing it on a lot of them. So keep that in mind. This is pretty accurate information. As usual, we're going to go from the number one game on the main slate, work our way through, and then cover the island games following that, which are Sunday night and Monday night. Let's get this underway. So Cleveland at Buffalo is the number one game on the slate. This has been bet up almost 6 points since earlier in the week when this was expected to be a blizzard game in Buffalo. They are now moving the game into a dome at Detroit. So we will monitor the rise there. That could be even higher come Sunday, but 49.5 currently as the Vegas game total. Buffalo 7.5 point quote-unquote home favorites against Cleveland. So Buffalo 28.5 points. Team implied total. Cleveland 21 point team implied total. Let's get into the Cleveland side here. They are 13th in offensive pass protection, 10th in offensive pass DVOA. Buffalo number 10 and number 5 in that category. That's more of a studs eat scenario. Who do you want to say as a stud on Cleveland? Probably Amari Cooper is the closest thing that they have. I know Donovan Peoples-Jones has been pretty good lately. I would say we will kind of see that run come to an end, and this would be more of an Amari Cooper type week as far as the pass game's concerned. We do go look over at the run game. Cleveland number 7 and number 3. Buffalo number 5 and number 6 on the defensive side at stopping the run. And if I didn't say it, Buffalo number 10 and number 5 at stopping the pass. But pretty much even across the board here for Cleveland's offense. I think this is going to be a Nick Chubb and a Kareem Hunt type of week. I think Buffalo should be able to get after Cleveland fairly well here. And I think that's just going to lead to quicker passes, which is a little bit better for Amari Cooper. It's a little bit better for Harrison Bryant. It's going to be better for Kareem Hunt. Getting those dump offs, and I think in the run game, as it kind of shows here, Cleveland, it's probably going to be more of a Nick Chubb game on the ground. And he's really the one that I'd be most interested in on the Cleveland side as a bring back if you're going to be, attacking this number one game on the slate. I don't know how popular this is going to be. This is information that came well ahead of time as far as, making your lineups, this weekend. We already know Buffalo and Cleveland has moved into Detroit, so this could get steamed up, get a lot of people kind of coming into this game expecting the number one game total to provide them with some fantasy sweets. But yeah, as far as that end on Cleveland, I do like Chubb, and probably most interested in the pass game for Amari Cooper there. And on Buffalo, we look at their offensive pass protection and DVOA at number 6 and number 4. Cleveland number 16 and 26. Buffalo should have plenty of time to pass against Cleveland. This is going to be good for pretty much everyone in the pass game. I do think Stephon Diggs will be good, but a lot of times when they're going to have a little bit extra time, this isn't a dome. That will favor Gabe Davis. That'll favor some of these ancillary targets that they have there, including in tight end Knox. You could see, some pretty good end zone or red zone usage here if they're able to move the ball. Looking at the run blocking side, Buffalo 22 and 21. This is an area they've struggled in all year, but we look at Cleveland at 30 and 32 in stopping the run. I believe Buffalo will have no issues running the ball against Cleveland here. If this is going to be kind of a blowout game, you could see maybe some of those running backs getting a little bit extra usage. Singletary, Cook, kind of on that range and getting into the end zone once or twice. If it's going to be a close matchup, that usually means Singletary's in there a lot more. We have seen since the Nyheim Hines trade that Singletary still basically maintains the entire backfield there. So he could be interesting in a DFS game where maybe not a lot of people are going to be on him, with the weird weather. Maybe that's, a lot of people kind of hands off of this game. I don't know how high he's going to be for a roster percentage, but he could get very interesting. And then the Buffalo pass game obviously should be just fine in this. Josh Allen's stacks are certainly viable. I believe Buffalo should score quite a few points here, even though it's kind of an away game, but it's in a dome. I do like Buffalo's chances of, reaching that 28.5 point team implied total. Wouldn't be surprised to see them hit 30, 34, somewhere in that range. Just keep an eye on this game. Cleveland, it's more of a studs eat. It's not a terrible matchup, but, those are the ones where the people who are good at football do well, and really that's pretty much Amari Cooper, that's Chubb, that's Kareem Hunt. Not necessarily Jacoby Brissett, but, if he's going to be dumping him off or getting the ball out a little bit quicker, which this could lead to, Amari Cooper and Harrison Bryant and Kareem Hunt would be probably the biggest beneficiaries of that particular scenario. On to the number 2 game on the slate, that is Chicago at Atlanta. Scroll on down here to find that game. And we have Chicago heading into Atlanta, another dome game here. Atlanta are 3-point home favorites. The 49 team implied total, 49 Vegas game total, not a team implied total. That would be astronomical. 49 Vegas game total, Atlanta accounting for 26 of that, Chicago 23. Number 2 on the slate this week. This one on paper looks very juicy as far as the defenses are concerned. Chicago 32 and 26 in offensive pass protection and DVOA. That's not very good, but we look at Atlanta's defense, number 31 and number 29. This has been the case the last few weeks with Chicago. They've played some really poor pass defenses, and we have seen Justin Fields absolutely dominate the last 2 weeks in the air as far as scoring touchdowns and being effective and not looking like a train wreck. Obviously, he's got the rushing upside that we've seen the last few weeks as well, but they've come in scenarios exactly like this against poor pass protection, pass rush defenses. Atlanta, no different there. That is a plus for Chicago. Offensive run blocking, Chicago number 14, number 9 in the DVOA. Atlanta 28 and 25. another big favor for Chicago here. Chicago's run game should be fine. As I had tweeted out earlier this week, David Montgomery is a cash game lock, essentially. We'll get into it a little bit later after we go through Atlanta and get into the pace of play, but cash game lock, I don't know. He's going to be super popular apparently in tournaments. Same with Justin Fields. I'm looking maybe to fade this in tournaments, and as I said, we'll get into that with the pace of play after the Atlanta side. As far as Atlanta's concerned, number 30 in offensive pass protection, number 14 in pass DVOA. So kind of poor there in the pass protection. Luckily for them, Chicago number 24 in the pass rush, number 30 in defensive pass DVOA. Atlanta should have no problem moving the ball in the air here. They should have a little bit more time than they're used to. That's going to be good for Drake London. That's going to be good for Kyle Pitts for sure. Demir Bird has kind of wiggled his way in there every once in a while to get a deep bomb. That certainly could be the case again this week. As far as the run game's concerned, Atlanta number 3 and number 8 in the offensive run blocking categories. Very good, both green. Chicago number 19 and 26 at stopping the run. Atlanta should have zero issues moving the ball on the ground against Chicago. That's usually how they want to play. So this is good for pretty much all the running backs there. If you're in deeper leagues, I still think like Caleb Huntley and Tyler Algier are, okay starters. If it's a 14-team league, something like that, or 12-team, you have to start, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, and several flex. They're certainly flex worthy. As far as DFS is concerned, I would say Cordero Patterson would be the one that I would like from the Atlanta side, as far as he scores touchdowns in bunches, 2 or 3 at a time. So I think this is one of those games where he could see a multi-touchdown game, provided Huntley and Algier don't steal some of those at the goal line. And I think Atlanta will have zero issues moving the ball against Chicago and should, in theory, have a decent amount of scoring opportunities. That being said, with both of these defenses being so poor, it looks like the offenses should absolutely smash. However, Chicago run game is the best out of the offensive situations. Atlanta run game is very good and the best out of the 2 situations. The pass games are just more dead even. It's bad against bad. They should be fine moving the ball through the air, but it's probably going to be done on the ground. We're just going to chew the clock. And then we look at kind of the pace of play for these 2 teams. Chicago, number 23 in overall pace of play. They're 13th, so a little bit better than average as far as offensive neutral situation pace of play, which is certain scenarios where the down and distance and the actual, it's fourth quarter, 2 minutes left to go, the situation isn't affecting the play calling. They're 13th there, but if they're leading, they're very slow. They're number 28 in the league. When they're trailing, they're 27th in the league. So the game's close. They're middle of the pack there. So it's not a fast-paced team, but then we get over to Atlanta, and they're red across the board. 30th in overall pace of play, 29th in offensive neutral situation pace of play, 32nd when they're leading, 27th when they're trailing, 27th when they're trailing, 22nd when the game is within 6 points. So Atlanta will be slow. They're going to be running. Chicago's not very quick. They will also be running. I do like the chances of this being under, but pretty decent, red zone efficiency. I think the offenses will be able to move the ball, but they're going to do it mainly via the ground. Certainly, things can go sideways. You can get a Demir Bird bomb. You could get a Darnell Mooney bomb. Chicago and Atlanta do have some pretty solid ADOT numbers for Justin Fields and Marcus Mariota. I believe they're both in the top 5 or top 6 as far as ADOT is concerned for quarterbacks. So they're certainly capable of explosive plays, but I do expect the run game to dominate and kind of chew the clock up here. Wouldn't be surprised, to see a 24-20 type game, and you're looking at this hitting the under. So that's more of the route that I see this game going. If it's going to be extremely popular, especially in tournaments, it's going to be a fade for me for a lot of those guys in tournaments. That could come back to bite me, but I think that's how I'm going to attack that this week. Certainly we'll get a few Justin Field lineups. Certainly we'll have David Montgomery in some lineups and Cordero Patterson. I just don't know if I'm going to go after this very heavily, and it sounds like the field right now will be doing that, so keep that in mind. Number 3 game on the slate is Dallas at Minnesota, which is kind of an interesting one here. We have Dallas going into Minnesota as 1.5 point road favorites. It opened at 1.5 points for Dallas as a favorite. 48.5 Vegas game total. Dallas accounting for 25 of those points. Minnesota for 23.5 of those points. So they're home underdogs at 1.5 there. And really, I got to do it. I know this could be a homer call. I am from Minnesota, but I think the upset alert is warranted here. I think Minnesota can win this game. It's at home. It's kind of evenly matched, and Minnesota, I believe, is just the overall better team here over Dallas. But we'll get into the game. Dallas heading into Minnesota, number 7 in offensive pass protection, 16th in offensive pass DVOA. Minnesota, number 9 and number 15. This is one of those that's dead even, and the people who are good at football will produce. CeeDee Lamb seems like he's very good at football. He will produce. I think this is going to be a big CeeDee Lamb game, as in like he could be slate breaker potentially this week, especially if this game kind of shoots out, which it certainly could, based off of kind of everything that we're looking at. And Minnesota's kind of slot corner there, I don't remember his name, but he's been kind of picked on by DFS people this entire season. CeeDee Lamb does play a lot from the slot, so I expect him to have a monster game against Minnesota here. Schultz certainly in play in DFS tournaments. You're going to look at Gallup. He has been getting targeted, and if Dallas is going to be moving the ball, which you kind of expect, and getting some end zone looks, Gallup certainly has proven himself to be effective in the red zone. As far as getting targeted and stuff. So on the run blocking side, we have Dallas number 5 and number 2, Minnesota number 7 and number 14. Again, very even here. People who are good at football will prove themselves in this particular one. I think Zeke is good at football. Pollard, obviously, we've seen in Zeke's absence be very good. It sounds like both of them will be playing. Fully expect that to be more of a committee. Not necessarily interested in either of those in DFS tournaments. If Zeke's going to be super low rostered and people are going to be kind of off of him due to the injury and he just hasn't looked good for like 2 or 3 years now, I certainly think Dallas can move the ball on them. He could sneak into the end zone twice, getting 12, 15 carries, 60 to 70 yards, and 2 touchdowns. If he's cheap and low roster, that's going to do it in DFS tournaments for sure. And I think that's how Dallas is going to play. I think it's going to be a big CeeDee Lamb show. I think you can play Schultz at tight end, Gallup sneaky as well in DFS tournaments. And then in the run blocking, I think both running backs will be effective. I just don't think you can necessarily play them in a tournament, but if you're going to go one way or the other, Zeke falls into the end zone twice because Dallas is effective moving the ball. That could be the case. If you think this is going to be a shootout, maybe, you want Pollard and his explosiveness, an ability to take, a screen pass or a run 50 or 60 yards to the house and go that route. As far as Minnesota's offense is concerned, they're number 10 in offensive pass protection, 19th in pass DVOA, pretty solid there. But Dallas, number 1 and number 4 in the defensive pass rush categories. They are very good at this. It's more of a studs eat scenario or a little bit worse than that for Minnesota. They're going to need to get the ball out quickly. Usually when that happens, Kirk Cousins looking at Justin Jefferson and the new target there, Hawkinson, I think, will be very highly targeted in this particular matchup if they're going to be under duress. Those guys should see some additional targets, as well as Dalvin Cook. I think you could see him this week with 5 or 6 targets on those dump offs, especially if the Minnesota offensive line cannot handle Dallas. I expect them to be able to adjust and get some targets to Dalvin Cook. Getting into the run game and Dalvin Cook, Minnesota number 13 and 10, Dallas 13 and 11. Almost dead even across the board there. That's the guys that are going to be good at football will produce. Dalvin Cook is definitely that dude. I do like Dalvin Cook this week. I don't know how popular he's going to be. He is one of the more expensive running backs, and I think he's in a spot where, you could stack Dallas with Dak, come back with Dalvin Cook, and I think that would be a very, very successful week for you in DFS. I think Dalvin Cook does have, slate breaker potential if he's going to be getting 5 or 6 targets and some of those receptions as Dallas gets after Minnesota in that offensive line. It sounds like Darisaw, left tackle there, is potentially out this week. Both teams very high-paced. Pretty much across the board, they're green, and I do like this game's chance of hitting the over. Again, I think this is a lot of studs eat scenarios for both offenses. They are chock full of studs: Pollard, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook. And I think those guys that are good at football are just going to have monster games this week. So this is certainly an enticing game, and one that I'm more comfortable in stacking both sides of, and getting pieces on both sides out of the top 3 games here. So they're at 48.5. Getting into number 4 game overall is Philly at Indy. We're going from 48.5 game total down to 45.5. So 1 game drop, but 3 total Vegas game points. That's a pretty significant drop here from the top 3 games this week. So 45.5 Vegas game total. Philly heading into Indy's Dome as 7-point road favorites. Indianapolis 7-point home underdogs there. Philly accounting for 26.25 of the 45.5 team implied total there. Indy 19.25 team implied total. We'll get into Philly, number 21 in offensive pass protection, number 6 in offensive pass DVOA. Indy number 15 and number 16 there. Slightly in the favor of Indy's defense as far as the offensive pass protection and defensive pass rush are concerned. I would expect Hurts not to have as much time as he would like. That's probably a little bit more beneficial for the tight ends there. I think it's Jarrett Stoll now that we had Ertz leave last year and Goddard is injured. I think he is the one that is the biggest beneficiary along with A.J. Brown. I think this could be A.J. Brown week. As far as needing to get the ball out quickly for Philly and having pretty much no other targets that kind of get these underneath their quicker routes. Offensive run blocking for Philly, number 6 and number 4. Indy, number 3 and number 5 at stopping the run. That's pretty much a studs eat, or the guys that are good at football will produce. Philly kind of a 3-headed monster there. Doesn't seem like any of those guys are necessarily like Dalvin Cook level studs. I don't think the run game is going to be super effective against Indianapolis. This is kind of a weird game as far as this is concerned. Philly's offense, I think, will struggle here to kind of move the ball, especially with Goddard out. They're going to have to rely heavily on that wide receiver core, and really it's kind of showing to be a matchup where this might not be super great for Philly's offense. And, Indy's defense could be sneaky in DFS tournaments. I'm not sure where they're sitting at as far as points, but as far as salary, but this could be an interesting one this week, especially if they're going to be getting after the quarterback and Philly's not going to be moving the ball on them as well as you would expect. On the Indianapolis side, they're number 29 and 31 in the offensive pass protection, so that's really poor. Philly at number 5 and number 1 in the defensive pass rush categories. Expect Philly to be after Indy super heavily. Matt Ryan not very mobile. This is going to need to be quick passes for Indy. That's going to be the tight ends getting target. We saw Granson be very effective last week. They do have a couple other guys, Jelani Woods, Mo Alley Cox. Expect them to get more targets. Expect Jonathan Taylor to get more targets. Expect Paris Campbell to get more underneath stuff as well. Certainly would expect, Paris Campbell to have 8 to 12 targets again in this. I don't know how effective he's going to be if they're getting the ball out quick, and what he's going to do with that. He's going to have to break something off in order to be super effective. Wouldn't be surprised, though, to see him with 8 or 9 catches for 60 or 70 yards in this particular game. As far as the run game is concerned for Indy, number 31 and number 31, which is really bad. Fortunately for them, Philly, number 25 and number 28 at stopping the run. I think Indy will be just fine running the ball against Philly. And I think Jonathan Taylor, as I said before, he already should see an increase in targets based off of Philly's pass rush and Indy's pass protection woes there. So I think he will see an increase in targets there. And then we look, hey, they should find the run game able to run a lot more effectively than they're usually used to. Last week was not a great week for Indy in the run game. We still saw Jonathan Taylor with that talent just take over that game. And I think this is what's going to happen again. I think Jonathan Taylor will take over this game at Indy, and Philly's poor defense, poor run defense there. I don't think Indy will be super successful passing the ball, but they got plenty of, decent enough weapons to get the ball out quickly to who are serviceable and can maybe keep the chains moving. And really, we're going to say upset alert here. I think Philly may lose its second game in a row here heading into Indy. I think Indy can grind this game and be very successful on the ground while Philadelphia kind of struggles to move the ball in this particular one with Goddard out and the run game not being maybe as effective as they're particularly used to. It's going to rely heavily on A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. But Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, if you want to get sneaky, maybe Devonta Smith, but having JT and Paris Campbell on the opposite side for DFS plays, I think that's where it's going to go. And I think Philly was going to struggle in this, and they may see their second loss. And I would certainly take Indy to cover that particular home spread there, as well as maybe just outright win the game. Just keep that in mind. That should be a very interesting one to watch here. Number 5 game on the slate, Detroit at New York Giants. That is the number 5 game on the main slate this week. Detroit heading into the Giants as 3-point road underdogs. So Giants 3-point home favorites, 44.5 Vegas game total. New York Giants accounting for 23.75 of that. 23.75 of those 44.5 points. Detroit at 20.75. We get into Detroit offensive pass protection, number 3 and number 11 in pass DVOA. Giants 22nd and 23rd. Big favor there in Detroit's pass game. They should have plenty of time to throw, which should be good for them. The unfortunate thing about this particular game is it should be kind of windy, 14 to 17 mile an hour winds during the game, and gusts like up to 32. So I don't think they're going to be throwing anything deep in this. They'll have time, but I don't expect them to be taking very much deep shots. So with the wind there and looking kind of at the run blocking for Detroit, number 4, number 14, Giants 26-23. Detroit should have no problem moving the ball both in the air and on the ground. Fully expect them to do that. If it's going to be windy, they're probably going to be more run heavy and keeping the passes underneath. That's going to be the Detroit tight ends. That's going to be the running backs, and that's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. Especially if they're going to have time to pass the ball here, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown could easily see 10 to 12 targets and take their pick and choose of when to get him the ball and be successful in that range. With the wind the way it is, maybe he sees even a few more targets than he normally otherwise would because they're not trying to take any deep shots. So keep that in mind. Run blocking, they should be just fine running the ball. It's pretty much going to be Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift there, although Swift, I don't know, he's just not getting the usage. I'm not sure what's really going on there with him. I would normally like him in this spot, especially with the wind coming up the way it is. I would like to see him get, a few extra targets in this particular matchup, and maybe we see that this week, but not somebody that I'm interested in starting in DFS. I just don't think the ceiling is there despite the matchup being good because of his usage. On the New York Giants side of the ball, 31st in offensive pass protection, 13th in offensive pass DVOA. Detroit 27 and 24. Giants should have more time than they're used to passing the ball this particular week, which is good. Slayton, pretty much the biggest beneficiary there. Maybe Saquon Barkley as well, if you think Detroit will actually get after the quarterback. But it seems like Wan'Dale Robinson, kind of a late pop-up there with an injury, might not play. Slayton pretty much going to be, the sole proprietary person there in the receiving game. So keep an eye on that. There should be, plenty of time to pass the ball. But who knows who's going to be getting that outside of Slayton. As far as the Giants are concerned in running the ball, 23rd and 13, Detroit 24 and 27 at stopping the run. This is one of those scenarios where the guys that are good at football will do very well. Fortunately for the Giants, Saquon Barkley is amazing at football, so he should have a very good time on the ground. As far as the offensive pass protection, like I said, who are they going to get the ball to? Maybe it's just Barkley. A lot of times when the lead wide receiver goes out for a team, you see the running back actually get a huge uptick in targets. This could be one of those particular matchups, especially if Detroit's going to be moving the ball and the Giants find themselves in passing scenarios a little bit more often. So keep that in mind. I think Barkley and Slayton, kind of good plays in DFS this week as far as volume are concerned, and I think Barkley's got a ceiling here that he should be able to hit, and I think Detroit should be able to move the ball pretty effectively. I'm on Ross St. Brown, certainly in the red zone, getting a touchdown or two, not out of the question in this particular matchup either. With that being said, let's get to the number 6 game on the slate. We got 2 of them. We'll get to the more interesting one first, Las Vegas at Denver. Then we'll get to Carolina, Baltimore, which we just scrolled past there. They're both at 41.5, so we actually dropped another 3 points here between Detroit Lions and the Giants game down to the next games on the slate at 41.5. So these are tied for 6 already. Way down there, barely above 40, which is really gross. But I do say it's kind of interesting here. We have Denver as 2.5-point home favorites, 22 team implied total. Vegas 19.5 team implied total. Getting into the Vegas side, 11 and 20 in offensive pass protection. Denver 11 and 3 in the offensive pass rush categories. Pretty much one of those studs eat. Guys who are good at football will do well in this. Davante Adams, without target competition, should see another smashing success this week. Getting into the run blocking side for Las Vegas, number 1 and number 7. Denver, number 23 and 20 at stopping the run. They also got rid of some defensive players there right at the trade deadline. So I fully expect this to be yet another Josh Jacobs and Davante Adams week for Vegas. I think Denver's defense is poor enough that Vegas should be able to move the ball on them pretty successfully, both with Davante Adams and Josh Jacobs. Fully expect that to be the case. I think Vegas can certainly hit 24, 27 points in this, way over that 19.5 team implied total that they have. On the Denver side, they're number 24 and 25 in offensive pass protection. Fortunately for them, Vegas 30th and 32nd. People have no issues moving the ball in the air on Vegas this year, so that's good for Denver. We do have Jerry Jeudy out for this week, so keep that in mind. Cortland Sutton, Greg Dulcich, probably the biggest beneficiaries there, and some scrubs. I'm probably not super interested in DFS, but I think Dulcich and Sutton are going to be the biggest beneficiaries this week of this particular matchup. I'm getting into the run game, 16 and 28 for Denver, Vegas 15 and 24. Kind of one of those scenarios where it's very evenly matched, and that suggests people who are good at football will produce. Denver doesn't really have any of those players. They got a mix of Chase Edmonds, Latavius Murray, and 29-year-old Melvin Gordon. They should be fine in this particular matchup, but it's a 3-way split and not one that you're super interested in getting involved with. If you think one of them falls into the end zone once or twice, certainly feel free to light your money on fire, but that's not going to be me. I think Denver's pass game is going to be where they're most effective moving the ball. They shouldn't have an issue running necessarily. I just don't want any of the players in DFS. As far as Vegas, they should have no problems moving the ball either. I do like the over in this, 41.5. If I could, I would bet the over on this. I like Vegas's chance the most of getting their team implied total over on this, 19.5 for Vegas. I Fully expect them to have 24, 27 at the end of this. Denver, a little less so, especially with Jerry Jeudy out, but I wouldn't be surprised to see them 24, 27. And like I said, I fully expect this game to kind of hit the over. Could be a little bit sneaky to get some one-off pieces in this for DFS purposes. I don't think there's going to be very much roster percentage on any of these players like Sutton, Dulcich, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs. I don't know how much they're going to see just because these two have been so disappointing as far as fantasy points are concerned this year. So getting into the other number 6 game on the slate, as I said, Carolina at Baltimore. Another windy game here to keep our eye on. Right here, Carolina at Baltimore. 14.25 team implied total for Carolina as 13-point road underdog. So Baltimore favored by 13 at home. 41.5-point Vegas game total. Baltimore accounting for 27.25 of those totals. Carolina, number 19 in offensive pass protection, 32nd in offensive pass DVOA. Baltimore, number 8 and number 11 at getting after the quarterback. Fully expect Baltimore defense to be in play here based off of this. Carolina is going to need to get the ball out quick. That's going to be more dump offs to the tight end. Maybe DJ Moore gets open a little bit quicker, and then the running backs there. I don't know who you're going to want, Blackshear or Hubbard or Deonta Foreman. I don't know. Those guys are probably the only viable ones from Carolina, that are playable in any sort of DFS fashion this week. They are 10th in run blocking, Carolina, number 11 in run DVOA, while Baltimore's 20 and 19. I expect Carolina to be way more effective running the ball. That's probably going to be the vast majority of their play calling. Just keep the ball out of Baker Mayfield's hands. They're going to be underdogs. I just don't like this in general, but if you're going to play anybody from Carolina, it's got to be the running backs, and Deonta Foreman may be the only one there based off of volumes of the last week or two. On the Baltimore side, they're number 17 in offensive pass protection, number 3 in the pass DVOA. Carolina 28 and 27. This is a huge favor for Baltimore's pass game. Looking into the run game, they're 28 in run blocking, actually number 1 in offensive run DVOA. A huge gap there just for Baltimore, 28 in the run blocking, but number 1 in offensive run DVOA. Kind of interesting. Carolina 16 and 22 at stopping the run. I don't think Baltimore's run game is going to be super effective, but they should, have an opportunity for a big run there at some point. I just think Baltimore is going to move the ball via the air in this, which is better for Lamar Jackson. I think that's going to be better for actually Robinson there as the wide receiver, and Isaiah Likely. It sounds like we're out Andrews, so Isaiah Likely, Robinson. You could get Duvernay in there. He's probably going to be the most popular pass catching option in Baltimore, but I do like Robinson this week as far as like a sneaky DFS play. Wouldn't be surprised to see him with 5-6 receptions in this for 70, 80, 90 yards and then a score. With his price point, it would be very effective in DFS, especially over on DraftKings. So keep that in mind. Kind of an interesting game as far as that's concerned. The only issue, Baltimore, as I said, it's going to be windy, 13 to 15 mile an hour winds there with gusts to 26. Not crazy, but probably enough to affect the pass game a little bit and kind of lean more into the run game, which is, where Carolina is probably going to want to go anyway. Just keep that in mind with this particular game. Getting into the number 8 game on the slate, we actually have 2 of those teams tied for that, and that's Washington at Houston, which we'll get into, and then Cincinnati at Pittsburgh, both tied for the 8th most points on the slate. Here's Washington at Houston. Going into Houston, Washington actually 3-point favorites. 40.5 Vegas game total, so gross. Washington accounting for 21.75 of those 40.5. Houston 18.75. This game a little bit interesting for DFS at least though. Washington number 25 and 27 in the offensive pass protection. Houston 19 and 25. Not a great matchup, but not bad for Washington. I expect them to have more time to pass the ball than they're used to. This is good for pretty much all the pass catchers there. Dotson's back. We have Curtis Samuel. We saw last week that McLaurin had a big week. Certainly plausible this week again with Houston's defense. I just think Washington will see a little bit of extra time compared to what they're used to most weeks. On the run blocking side, they're 29th and 25th. Again, they're poor. Their whole offensive line looks like it's poor, but Houston, number 31 and 31 in the stopping the run and the run DVOA. Everybody has ran on Houston. I think they're one of only 3 teams in history since like 2006 or something to have their running backs averaging 30 fantasy points per game against them. So I believe Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson are excellent plays in DFS this week. Kind of splitting work there, but I think both of them will be effective enough to actually be able to play in a DFS tournament of some sort. Gibson, obviously the more explosive runner. We've seen him kind of creep up and get into the similar volume to what Brian Robinson's getting, but he also gets that pass down work. So it's kind of a pick your poison. Which one do you want? Which one's cheaper is probably going to be what ends up being the case if you're going to go that route. But I do like Gibson. He's more explosive. It seems like they're not afraid to give him the ball on the goal line either. But Robinson certainly capable on the goal line as well. I just like Washington's ability to move the ball in this particular matchup and have plenty of scoring opportunities against this Houston defense. On the Houston side, they're number 20 and 30 in the offensive pass protection categories. Washington number 14 and 20. A little bit in the favor of Washington there. Houston, probably one of those like studs eat kind of scenarios. Nico Collins, Cook. Seems like they're kind of battling injuries coming back. Not really sure who the ball is going to be thrown to in Houston, but they should be in an okay scenario. As far as the run game's concerned, Houston number 20 and 26, Washington number 11 and number 2 at stopping the run. Usually the only guy you want in Houston right now is Pierce. I fully expect him to kind of have an ineffective game. He's certainly going to get the volume. I just, in cash plays, he's probably been super popular. I would probably avoid that this week. I think he'll get the opportunity for sure. I don't see him being very effective in this particular matchup. Houston, a little bit behind the ball in the pass game. Certainly the same scenario in the run game, except worse. So I don't see them getting very many scoring opportunities for Pierce there to get, in the end zone. If he's getting you 60 to 80 yards on the ground, one catch for 8 yards, that's not going to do it for you in cash, despite the volume. So he's an avoid. I think all the Houston players are kind of an avoid, but the Washington players are all basically fires, man. Start every single wide receiver, especially if you think Washington's going to be up big in this. Those Washington running backs are going to be excellent plays in DFS and probably win people some money this week. The other number 8 game on the slate, as I said, Cincinnati at Pittsburgh, one of the late games. We have Cincinnati going into Pittsburgh as 3.5-point favorites. Again, 40.5 game total for number 8th ranked game on the slate. Cincinnati 22-point team implied total. Pittsburgh 18.5-point team implied total. We did see Cincinnati get sacked a bunch in week 1. 4 turnovers or interceptions from Joe Burrow in week 1 against his Pittsburgh defense. They did get Watt back, and he is certainly also in play. Again this week, could be a similar situation. Cincinnati, number 28 in offensive pass protection, 12th in pass DVOA. Pittsburgh matching them there, 23 and 18, a little bit, maybe in the favor of Pittsburgh. Cincinnati may be under duress yet again in this particular matchup, so just keep an eye on that, especially with Watt back. They're going to maybe need a little bit quicker passes. You could see that leading to more tight end targets, more running back targets, Higgins and Boyd potentially. If you think they're going to hold their own against Pittsburgh, Higgins certainly in play here as Chase is out, kind of in almost a studs eat scenario. Getting into the run blocking, Cincinnati number 11 and number 5, Pittsburgh 10 and 7. Again, evenly matched there. People that are good at football will be good. I believe Joe Mixon is good at football. His underlying metrics this year, though, have been pretty poor. So maybe he's, kind of past that age apex, and this is the first year of his decline. He's still, getting the volume to make himself viable in your year-long leagues, but probably not a huge ceiling here in DFS. I certainly think he'll be okay, but maybe not, having a ceiling game like he did with the 5 touchdowns the last time we saw him in uniform. On the Pittsburgh side, number 16 in offensive pass protection, number 22 in offensive pass DVOA. Cincinnati number 29 and 9. Pittsburgh should have some time to pass the ball here. I don't know if they're going to be super explosive based off of what Cincinnati's pass DVOA is, but they should have some time to throw. And I think that's going to be good for Kenny Pickett and the pass game there with Freiermuth and Deontay Johnson and Kenny Pickett. I do like those stacks this week, despite the game total kind of being poor here. Didn't seem like weather was going to be a factor here in Pittsburgh for this particular matchup. So, they should be fine passing the ball. Kenny Pickett, if you want to get one-offs from Pittsburgh just to kind of complete a lineup with Deontay Johnson or Pickett or Freiermuth, they're probably going to be very low rostered, and I think they should have, solid games. Maybe not a ceiling game, but hey, if they got time to pass, they could be moving the ball down and getting, near the end zone. As far as the run blocking is concerned, Pittsburgh 24 and 24, Cincinnati 18 and 12. Not a great matchup for Pittsburgh. Certainly not the worst in the history, but I wouldn't expect a Najee Harris game to be a blow-up spot here either. I do, Vegas has this as a 40.5 game total. Wouldn't be surprised if Pittsburgh can move the ball a little bit better, through the air and score some points. Certainly wouldn't be surprised to see them with 20-21 instead of the 18.5 that they're projected to have here. Cincinnati, it's more of an evenly matched one. They're getting, they had a lot of turnovers the last time. If they don't do that, maybe they score, 24-28 in this particular matchup, and this hits the over. As far as the ceiling's concerned, I just don't like anybody from Cincinnati's side for a ceiling game. Pittsburgh, I could see, one Pickett lineup with some stacked options there being successful, but I'm not going to crank out a bunch of lineups with that this particular week. Getting into the 10th game on the slate, gross, Rams and the Saints. Kind of gross that this ended up being such a weird season for the Rams. Coming off the Super Bowl, they look pretty bad on offense. Now Cooper Kupp is out. We have the Saints actually 2.5-point home favorites over the defending champ Rams here. 39 Vegas game total, and they're not even the worst on the slate this week. The Saints accounting for 20.75 of that 39 points. Rams 18.25 team implied total. They're 22nd and 23rd in the pass category, offensive pass protection categories. The Rams are. Saints number 7 and 14. They should be able to get after the Rams. I think the Saints defense are in play here based off of this, and kind of, the Saints projected to be ahead. They're going to need a little bit quicker passes. If you think, I don't know who's going to be the underneath target now, if it's going to be Allen Robinson, Ben Skoranek, tight end Higbee's been in there blocking a bunch, so they maybe send him out, to run some short routes if they're under duress, or they keep him in to block more. I don't know what's going to really happen from there, but they did lose Kupp, and I think this pass protection is just going to be even worse. If there's nobody getting open right away, the Saints certainly could have a heyday as far as sacks are concerned against this Rams offensive line. So keep that in mind. Like I said, the Saints, they might be popular defense in DFS even, if people kind of get that in mind. As far as the run blocking, the Rams 32nd and 30th. Pretty poor there. New Orleans 14 and 18. They're middle of the pack there. Rams are just going to struggle to move the ball. I would be surprised if they get 18 points in this, to be honest. And really, the only Rams player that I'm remotely interested in playing is Allen Robinson, and that's pretty much it on that side. And I don't see him having a ceiling game. I could see him, 6 or 7 receptions for 80 yards. Maybe they get a touchdown, but pretty much an all hands off deck for the Rams offense this week. New Orleans, number 14 and 24 in the offensive pass protection categories. Rams, 20, 21. A little bit in the favor of the Saints there. More of a Olave and Jarvis Landry probably type game, especially if you think they're going to be getting after the quarterback a little bit. Those guys probably in play there. And really the only pass game options, outside of Kamara. Run blocking for the Saints, number 9 and 15. The Rams, 12 and 4. The tightly matched ones there usually means the guys that are good at football will produce, and that's Kamara. I don't like this game just in general, low total. I don't think the Rams can push the ball down the field. Saints might have the ball, handed over to them on defense with their defense more often, which could be good for Kamara and his chances of getting some scoring opportunities. I just don't see the ceiling necessarily in this. Wouldn't be surprised if, this is 20 to 6 type of game. Saints win, and 7 of the points scored from the Saints were on the defensive side, and offensive side only had 2 touchdowns total. Unless somebody's scoring twice, they're not going to be viable in DFS. This is a game where it's going to be hands off pretty much, but you should be able to start some of these guys in your seasonal leagues. Just temper your expectations as far as what their ceiling is going to be. Then we'll get to the worst game on the slate: New York Jets going into Foxborough. Very windy game here. Windiest one on the slate, and also a 38-point Vegas game total, which is why they're the worst one on the main slate. Jets, 17.25 team implied total out of that 38. The Patriots at 20.75 as 3.5-point home favorites. Again, I said this is going to be windy. It's 15 to 20 mile an hour winds expected during the game times, with gusts up to 34. Don't expect the pass game to be very effective here. It's going to be, quicker passes, shorter passes, and probably a lot of running the ball. And we'll get into what the offenses might be able to do given the situation with the weather. Jets, number 12, number 18 in the pass protection categories, kind of middle of the pack there. Patriots, number 3 and number 2 defensive pass rush categories there. Expect him to get after the quarterback plenty quick, which Zach Wilson hasn't shown he can really handle that very well. If they're passing, I expect them to be under duress and going to need quicker passes. Conklin, tight ends, running backs would be the biggest beneficiary there. Really, we've only seen Garrett Wilson be effective in the pass game pretty much this whole season. The run blocking side, the Jets 19 and 12, New England 22 and 21 at stopping the run. They've been improving this season, but that's more of a even case there. Jets, if they're going to want to move the ball this week, it's probably going to have to be on the ground, so I don't think James Robinson is out of the question in your seasonal long. I'm not going to stick him into any DFS lineups. Michael Carter, if you think he's going to get some dump offs and be pretty effective there in the run game, he'd be a super dart throw. I don't expect him to have a ceiling game, but in seasonal long leagues, he's probably okay, especially in a PPR league. But hands off on DFS. New England side, 26 and 28 in the offensive pass protection. Jets, number 12 and number 6. New England should be under pressure. If they're going to be passing the ball, they're going to need to get it out quick. That's going to be to the tight ends there and the running backs. Similar situation to the Jets. As far as the run blocking for the New England Patriots, 17 and 22. The Jets, 6th and 10th at stopping the run. I don't think the Patriots are going to be able to move the ball very well. They're going to be under duress when they're passing it. The run game kind of seems like it'll be sluggish. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead. We're going to say upset here. I think the Jets can pull this off in New England. I just think, they're going to kind of grind this one out. We saw them beat Buffalo. Just the way this is kind of setting up with the wind and whatnot, and Patriots maybe not being able to move the ball very effectively on the ground, and if they're going to be passing it, they're going to be under duress and needing those quicker passes. I just think the Jets are kind of setting up a little bit better in this game. I think this is one of those where the Jets could pull it out there in Foxborough. Just keep that in mind. As far as prop betting and things like that, I think this is going to be a very poor game offensively, favoring more so the Jets' run game, and New England should struggle putting the under on a lot of the pass game options there in New England. Very smart this week. That's going to do it for the main slate. Let's get into those island games. Thursday night, very successful. 4X, the entry that my son and I put in. Just did one lineup there, and it was highly successful. Finished 1785 out of almost 90,000 entrants. Upwards of 700th at one point during the matchup. So very effective on these island games with this information. Kansas City heading to Los Angeles to face the Chargers as 5.5-point road favorites. 28.5 team implied total for the Chiefs, 23 for the Chargers, 51.5 total from Vegas. Woo! All right, we got a game over 50. Kansas City, number 4 in offensive pass protection, number 2 in offensive pass DVOA. The Chargers, 21st and 12th. Very good for the Kansas City pass game. Sounds like we have Mecole Hardman out. Sounds like we have Juju out. That's going to be Travis Kelce. That's going to be Kadarius Toney. And maybe we see some Sky Moore. Maybe we see some Justin Watson. This is an island game matchup, so keep that in mind. I think Patrick Mahomes as your captain, very doable. Kelce, very doable as a captain. And then getting this Kansas City pass game should be pretty effective. As far as the run blocking, Kansas City 18 and 20, not great, but Los Angeles Chargers 27 and 29. I do expect the Kansas City run game to also be effective here. It seems like Pacheco is the one that's getting the vast majority of the run game work. If Kansas City is going to be up in this and able to move the ball, we could see Kansas City actually run the ball a little bit more and Pacheco be one of those sneaky things. If you are somebody that's entering in quite a few lineups, certainly could have Pacheco in there as your DFS captain as a sneaky play if you're looking to be the sole proprietary of all the first place money. Again, fully expect Kansas City to dominate on offense here. Good, great matchup as far as the pass protection. Good matchup on the run game there for Kansas City. It's just a three-way split on the running backs, but I think Pacheco's the biggest beneficiary based off of what you would expect from this particular game. If you think it's going to be closer and more of a shootout, McKinnon probably who you're going to want for the island game. Offensive pass protection for the Chargers, number 2 and number 21. Kansas City almost matched that at number 4 and number 22. Studs eat. Sounds like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams will be back and pushing Josh Palmer to third instead of number 1 target option there. That's going to be good all around for the Chargers pass game. Just to have those guys out there. I don't think they're going to be super effective right away. So I think having like a Gerald Everett, who is now off the injury list, and having all this target, all this, defensive focus on the other parts of the pass game, I think he will have a solid matchup here where he can get open and get the ball as the other guys are kind of taking the defensive attention away from him. On the run blocking side, Chargers number 30 and 32, Kansas City 29 and 17 at stopping it. I think the Chargers should be pretty successful running the ball here too. I think that's good for Eckler. If you think the Chargers are kind of, going to have some heat on them, Eckler is certainly an option as far as pass game is concerned there as well. Especially if the defense is going to be having to pay attention to Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Maybe they just dump it off a little bit more to Eckler. Typically, though, you're getting those two weapons back. It's probably going to be a detriment to the amount of Eckler targets you're going to see, but he should be effective on the ground in this. I like both teams' opportunities to push the ball, push the pace. But I would say stacking like a 4-2 or 5-1 on the Kansas City side might be pretty successful here in this particular island game matchup. Just keep that in mind. Should be a fun one to watch on Sunday night. Monday Night Football, probably a little less so fun to watch. San Francisco heading into Arizona as an 8-point road Favorites, Arizona 17.75 team implied total at home. San Francisco 25.75 team implied total there on the road. 43.5 overall, which is kind of gross. Again, 8-point favorites for San Francisco on the road here. Offensive pass protection for San Francisco, number 15-7. Arizona 26-19. That's a pretty big favor for San Francisco. They should have time to throw. That's historically been pretty good for Ayuk to be successful on the week. Run blocking side, San Francisco 15-23. Arizona 21-16 at stopping. Not as great of a matchup, but still in the favor of San Francisco there. Seems like we have a two-way split between Christian McCaffrey and Mitchell. I would expect that to continue. I think these guys are looking more, Super Bowl aspirations, and they don't want to just run Christian McCaffrey into the ground. That's not good for these island games, but certainly you could play both of them in your island game. I don't know how many people are going to do both of those guys in their lineups, but should be interesting. Bring it back with Ayuk, and then maybe get some Arizona players. As far as Arizona is concerned, 18 and 29th in the pass protection. That's pretty poor. San Francisco defense in play, number 6 and number 10 at getting after the quarterback. Arizona's going to need quicker passes, which is going to be more Rondale Moore. Hopkins certainly an intermediate target, maybe gets a little bump there, but probably tight end and running back and Rondale Moore going to see the vast majority of these targets if they're under duress. The run game for Arizona is very poor, 25-27 versus San Francisco, number 2 and number 3. Don't expect the run game to do much in this. I don't think Arizona's going to be able to move the ball on the ground. They're going to have difficulties doing it in the air. Really, I think Rondale Moore is going to be the biggest beneficiary on the Arizona side of just keeping those targets underneath. Maybe Trey McBride. Not sure what he's got for a rapport with the quarterbacks, though. So really like a 5-1 San Francisco, get 5 San Francisco players, and then bring it back with Rondale Moore maybe on Arizona side. Should be good for your DFS island games. Anyway, that's going to do it for this week's episode, week 11 of the Adjusted Line Player Report in 2022. Coming at you this Saturday morning, giving you all the perfect prop bets, getting you these island games, and getting you the guys that you need in DFS to win those tournaments and make that money. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope you got all the extra info that you needed to with your DFS grab this week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see ya on the flip side, and let's go win some money together. Thanks, everybody. Bye.